Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, an entrepreneurial self-improvement podcast for educators who want to live life on their own terms. Dubbed the Mobile University for Entrepreneurs, this is the show where personal development meets purpose-driven living with a healthy dose of entrepreneurship along the way. Each episode, I will bring in insightful, no-fluff conversations with educators, entrepreneurs, authors, and change makers who will share their journeys, strategies, insights, and real life advice on personal growth, personal finance, and creating a life you get to live, not the life you have to live. Whether you're working on your money mindset, building a business, or just figuring out your next chapter, the Dr. Will Show is your go-to resource for leveling up inside and outside of the classroom. Tune in and subscribe. Class is always in session. I am your host, Dr. Will, and today's guest is Jenelle McClenahen. And y'all, I'm excited. And I hope you will too when you listen to the gems coming today. And what I like about our guest today is that she not only built a business, but she built a business that is a product. And I'm excited to jump into this. So for those who be listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Citrus, Spotify, and Audible, will you please introduce yourself, Jenelle?
Thank you, Dr. Will. Yes, I'm Jenelle McClenahen, the CEO and founder. I'm very, very happy to be here. And yeah, I am the CEO of Symplifyed, which is an Edtech startup. I joke around that I accidentally created a startup because I started this like 3 years ago. As I'm a classroom teacher, I taught third grade inclusion, and at the same time, my school district, so I had taught, elementary school, and I was teaching inclusion, which means I teach kids with autism mainstreamed into my classroom. My son was actually diagnosed with autism a few years ago. And so I started this journey of going to ABA therapy with him. And for those of you who don't know what ABA therapy is, it's where we learned parent-led strategies to help improve behavior. And it's very data-driven. And so in the meantime, while I was on this new app to learn and we're trained on like how to deal with certain behaviors, how to understand and support him better, I was thinking as a teacher and somebody who'd been in education for over 10 years, like we have to have a better way that we're monitoring goals and success, right? So I ended up creating a tracker that did standards-based grading, like 1 through 4 grading. And we broke apart standards, like academic standards, into small little chunks, right? Like I can identify the main idea, I can find the key details. And so doing that, I ended up revamping my entire reading, writing, and math curriculum and seeing incredible success where we went from 58% of students reading on grade level to 100% by the end of the year.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is not because I'm a wonderful reading teacher. That reading was I love math. Reading was like a bit of a struggle for me, but it was because the way we broke things down helped not just break things down for my students, but helped to break things down for me as the teacher and exactly how I'm supposed to teach them. Right. And so, I started this journey doing it, in my own classroom and seeing the results in my own class. And then I just kind of became obsessed with like I can statements and breaking things apart. And so in the meantime, I started working as a part-time consultant and still teaching. And I ended up developing a behavior tracker and also an IEP goals tracker. So an individualized education plan tracker, again, to kind of help streamline how we're tracking goals, right? I ended up, connecting with a developer who created a platform that my initial reason for starting the platform was actually to just use it with my current clients. Like I just had a few schools that I was working with. But then when in the midst of developing it, I ended up posting on Facebook groups and I got like over 500 comments to like try this new behavior tracker, and things just kind of took off from there when I realized there was a huge need. Our biggest product, our service is definitely our behavior log, because most schools, as I'm sure you know, actually are much more reactive when it comes to behavior than they are proactive. So we're usually monitoring like tier 2, tier 3 interventions versus like our behavior tracker does that, but it also does tier 1. So it's just like, what is a teacher doing? Like, what are some key strategies and supports that a student needs in order to be successful, right? And like being able to track that and identify baseline. And so it's been a huge game changer. And again, something I kind of stumbled upon, but definitely something I'm extremely passionate about, especially because of my son and then working with kids with autism. Most of these behavior issues are typically like neurodivergence, like the kids with ADHD or autism, dyslexia, all those kind of things are, students just have different learning differences and they need different ways to be supported.
So, in hearing about your journey, now I want to know because you've given us this backstory, and which is amazing to hear. What was it like working with a developer to create your platform, right?
Yeah.
Because you have this background in education in which you can tell the developer exactly what you are looking for. But now, as they are building it, you have to fine tune with them that feedback and beta test it and making sure that it's actually delivering what you are looking for. So walk
Yeah.
us through that process. What was that actually like?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that I actually haven't been asked before. And it is an experience, right? Because my experience is in education as a teacher. And it's very interesting to work with a developer who's all tech minded, right? And I live here in the Silicon Valley in the tech central. But again, my experience is purely education, right? So I know the classroom really well, but in terms of, creating an app, it's just not something I ever really thought about before until, I started working with my developer. And, it was this big aha moment where I realized, oh, you can develop tech to help streamline so many of the things that I was doing manually. You know what I mean? Like I was creating all these like spreadsheets for like clients and like everything. And then I'm like, it really started clicking more throughout the process because I actually didn't have an idea of what I wanted it to look like. I just knew I wanted to get off of Google Sheets and protect like the work that I had done. That was my only thing that I wanted, right? And when I was working with him, it helped me to realize more and more like, oh, this is how people scale their business, right? Which I know you go into a lot. And so it helps you to, it really is taking that mindset of working as a consultant, which is working with a few schools or like, very personalized systems. And then now scaling that into like, what does that look like for everybody, right? But also doing it in a very thoughtful way because I care about my clients, right? And I don't want to just scale in order to like, make a buck or whatever. Like you want to really make sure that they're cared for, especially because the more I've been into this process, I do not want to be an ed tech platform that many of them are out there that are just clearly like not in education, don't understand like what it's like to feel overwhelmed and overstimulated in your day. And so I put a lot of thought and simplicity, right? Simplified. A lot of simplicity into it so that it's very accessible for anybody, regardless of your tech experience, and making it as simple as like a Google Sheets form, right? And like what we as teachers are used to, because we don't have the capacity to try to understand a whole nother platform and figure out like, how this thing works. So I would say working with a developer really helps me to understand like ease, like how to bring ease and to scale something in a way that, again, you're thinking like much larger picture. Like you're thinking of a lot of users and a lot of people and what they're looking at. And so it's definitely a different lens going from consulting to ed tech, right? But as we developed, so I didn't quite have like they and I learned all these terms like wireframes. They had to like they do like a mock-up of like what each screen would look at. I learned a lot about user interface and user design, right? Which I like became obsessed with. But the more we had our MVP, which is our minimal viable product, also another term that I learned, and our beta, we had our beta users on there, and I was gaining a lot of feedback, which was so cool. Like I believe my biggest success is definitely from listening to my clients. I listen to my users and I guide our features based on what my users are saying. That's a huge part of what I do and what I think is really important. It's not just what I care about and what I want to build, but it's what people actually need, right? So for example, when we built the behavior tracker, I initially was thinking, okay, we can like monitor strategies week by week. So for example, if a student, is having a hard time, maybe we implement like movement breaks, a fidget, and like, chunking their tasks or something like, accommodating their work. So they would click that and they would just only log it once a week. But they're talking to my users and my beta users, a lot of these students need to be monitored daily, right? So we added a daily tracker instead. And now like that's one of our biggest features because everyone wants to kind of see how they're doing day to day. But then also the weekly is important because we want to focus on the positive supports, right? So again, that's like kind of how we shifted and like thinking, okay, first we needed this. Now we're going to pivot because, a lot of people have issues that they want to see daily, 3 times a day is how much they track. And then the more that we had the MVP and we got it out there, that is now where actually Jessica Lane, who I'm working with, my director of analytics, she is starting to do the back end and we've like revamped our entire user interface. So like now it's like it's much more modern. It's like I've become much more hyper focused on like how it looks and like, which is a big part of the experience too. So it's been a growing process for me, right? Like to learn to start from like not, really intending to do this to like becoming more and more involved in like what it is like to be a user. I don't know if that answers the question
Yes.
really.
And so I'm excited, right? I'm real excited because typically when we look at the entrepreneur that we go to conferences and we see on the stage, they keynote, they go to schools and they deliver sessions. And those packages and services that they deliver to schools require them to normally be there unless they do have online masterminds or they offer courses. But you, however, you don't have to be at a school district for a school district to actually purchase your platform. So what is it like for you now when you are looking at your business and you're looking at your business model? Because again, you are not playing in that same lane that they're playing in. And when you are looking at the RFP process and you're looking at bids and you're looking at this level of playing with a school district, because this is a whole new ball game of what you are dealing with at this point. What is that like, or what has that been like for you?
Yeah, that's another great question. Shifting your mindset and understanding, and that I'm still going through that process because as we, are dealing with investors now and like talking, it's a very large scale, and sometimes my brain still can't wrap around it. Like thinking of having X amount of schools that are like, I'm like, can I support that? Because this is our first full year on the platform. We betaed last year. We had our MVP last year. I've had clients for the past couple years, but this is our first full year with our, platform, and we're even still developing. But I think it's such an interesting thing to be able to serve like so many schools, like hundreds and then thousands of schools, right? Like so to think about that is something, it's such a shift. And I'm a big believer, and this is like my whole platform too, because we're about goal setting, is I do believe in growing at the right pace too. So because I don't want to become like other platforms that just check a box and that, they just put it out there, but there's not a ton of care that goes into it. I really want to pave a new way where you're almost like merging those two, right? Like merging the care of like being in person and the quality, right? Like what does that look like in a platform, right? So kind of like so we developed this like what we call almost like a TurboTax flow. So I think of like TurboTax, right? Like tax is such a difficult concept to do. And yet TurboTax, like the way that you go, if you've ever done TurboTax, like it just takes you step by step. Like, did you get a new home this year? Or like, and then you just kind of click. And so my platform is way less complicated than that. But I wanted that feel of like, there's no route except for where my platform is going to take you. And even though I can't be there in person, like you're talking about at these conferences, and I can't, right? I want my platform to replace that, right? In a sense where, and I still consult, I still do that, right? But also like, I want to make sure it's quality and also guiding them in the way that I would guide them, right? Because I learned through many of my clients that you're pretty much asking the same questions and doing the same things. So if you learn how to create a map of like, if the client wants this, then that way, if this, if that, so we literally start on my platform with choose your focus. behavior or goals. Like we really streamlined it. It's either you're working on behavior or you're setting a goal, right? Whether it's academic, where, it's an IEP goal, whether it's a professional development goal, we also go into that too. It doesn't matter. And then with the help of AI, right? Like the AI makes so much more possible. We have prompts where you just like type in like what behavior problems you're having, and then it'll come up with a bunch of different strategies and you can assign it, right? So kind of help guide. So it's more than just like a platform that you go on and then you have to click through all the features, right? It's something that guides your flow. Can you go and, go to the different trackers? Absolutely. But we really want to combine that, like, what you're talking about of like, that quality of being in person, because that, I don't want to replace that in a way, but I also want to be able to help on such a large scale, right? And that's where kind of your other question came in, because it's like, that's where you start to shift your thinking of like, how can I develop something that can help so many more people than me having to go in person and do?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So how do you balance this simplicity that you are talking about? And it's all even in the name, simplified, and going in depth in your product and keep it user friendly by still being as powerful as you want it to be?
That is a really good question that really helps guide everything that I do, to be honest, because I can understand why so many platforms get so feature happy. They add all these different features, and I have clients who are requesting things, right? And they want a certain, like, I get it. Like you want like to be able to do a lot, right? And there's a couple ways to encounter that. I think a lot of that is user interface, right? So like the what it looks like and how we design it, right? Instead of creating like multiple buttons, like my Jessica and I, we sit there and we talk about it for a while. Like we look at the page, we think about ourselves as a teacher. We think about, different platforms we use and like, where can I put this button? Like, it's just like a simple thing, like a button, like an edit button. Like, where would that make the most sense? Who needs it, right? Like, should this be visible to everybody, right? Things like that, like we're still continuing to develop where we don't want users to see everything if it's not applicable to them, right? So like learning to adapt, right? If a teacher is more focused on behavior, then behavior is going to be their route and what they're able to see. If they're more focused on goals, they have ability to like log service minutes and accommodations, right? But keeping that in mind, I think is really important. Not only do we have a flow on there and like right when you get on, it's also a flow of like, how we're designing working with entire districts too. We know Jessica's also, she was a high school math teacher herself. And just being in education, we know that the best way to implement is not to just make it mandatory. Teachers will say, no, I'm not going to do this, right? We know that they'll just be like, well, and I've been that teacher, right? Like, oh, great. Like, I don't learn another thing. And what's different about us is like, one of our biggest clients is in Chicago public schools. And they willingly want to like, I have more and more teachers coming to me and wanting to use the platform. And that is the kind of momentum I want to continue to build, right? That it's because teachers want to use it, not just because they're made to use it, right? And so we just embody that thought process of like everything that we're adding and doing. How are we not overwhelming the user, right? With just adding a million things, and how do we guide them in a way? Because it's also more than just a platform. Like I was saying before, it really is building in that consulting, right? And building in that like level of care that we help guide them through, just like we would a student, right? If like the whole thing is based on those I can't statements, we want to start small, the smallest thing possible to feel successful, and keep building on that. And that goes with the platform too. Start small, and then when you're ready to expand, then you can. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yes. And how do you envision Simplified's role in transforming schools?
So my big long-term vision is, I actually have a mantra that I say to myself is that, I was once the student, the kid who needed to feel like I could grow, right? And so I now build tools so no child feels too alone, too broken, or too afraid to grow, right? I like literally come back to that because my dream is for two things, I'll say. One, I say it's a selfish reason that my son can go into any single school and feel loved and supported and connected because the teachers have the right tools to help support him. right? That's my own like selfish goal, that my son can go into any school anywhere in the world, right? And my second one is that we build a place where, because teachers are given the right tools and the clarity to understand what their students need, whether it's academically, behaviorally, emotionally, all of it, that these students grow up to be adults who know exactly what they need. That, like, as an adult, you now come in, you're like, oh, I know, I need a movement break after 30 minutes, or I need, a visual time, or I need a schedule, right? Like, it took me too long in my life to recognize the things that I needed. And I think, how amazing would it be that our teachers help bring up a generation of children, of students who grow up to be adults, who can advocate for the things that they need and know exactly like how their brain works and what their bodies need, and how, to advocate for themselves. So that is like my big vision, which is exciting to think about, like when you scale, right, and using a platform.
Well, what kind of feedback have you had thus far that surprised you the most?
The feedback, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, was I was actually surprised by how much our daily tracker was used, because my intention was actually more for the weekly tracker to be used. And like seeing a bunch of users on, and like we've really been analyzing the data and like looking, and it's kind of that in itself is a mindset shift too, because I think a lot of teachers we're used to like documenting behavior versus supporting behavior, right? And so it's kind of like it's been interesting, but we've really like taken that as a strength, right? Like, you love to use a platform in terms of like tracking daily behavior, but also, and we've added features where it literally will add like what strategies and supports did you use, because it's about empowering the teacher to know like, oh, what I'm doing is making a difference. Even if the student is still calling out 10 times a day, that's better than 15 times a day before, right? So like, what is the baseline, and kind of like understanding. I don't know if this is like necessarily feedback, but through onboarding a lot of clients, I will say like teachers love to talk about behavior and love to vent about it. And I think that's a very reasonable thing. And something that has kind of been surprising, but very cool to see, is when I'm talking to teachers about behavior and they'll tell me like, oh, Jenelle, the student, it's like, because I'll ask them, I'm like, okay, like what's the behavior? Oh, they call out all the time. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, how often is it happening? And they'll be like, it's every single time I say something, every single time, like, right? And then I'll say, okay, because for our tracker, we have to find a baseline. I was like, but how many times is it happening? And they're like 5 times a day. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so it like grounds them. And it's interesting to see that feedback, because I think helping them find a number actually does help them feel more in control. Like, okay, 5 times a day, it feels like a lot. I get it, because 5 times 30, or how many kids you're seeing a day, that's a lot, right? Like, but if we help to like hone in on like who, like this one student, it's happening 5 times a day. Yes, maybe I'm annoyed by it throughout the day, right? But also like 5 times do it, right? Like, and we can help to decrease that number, right? And meet a student where they're at, not where we want them to be, right? So I would say that's been interesting, as like understanding other people's, because I have my own experience as a teacher and dealing with behavior, but like other people's experience with behavior and what that looks like for them.
Mm. As a founder, what were some of your major hurdles you had to overcome in the early days?
There's so many hurdles. I think, something I've had to really get used to is rejection and failure. I think like those, you're just never, I think to be successful, you have to like embrace those moments, right? Like, you have to embrace when like things don't go the way that you thought it would, or like you have this idea and people are maybe not as excited as you were about it, right? And that used to like, kind of get me down like early on. And then I just quickly realized like the quicker you come back from that and you like learn and grow from like that feedback, and really all feedback is good feedback. It doesn't matter, right? And I think, yeah, like I think just being able to be resilient and look at things, I don't want to say like non-emotionally, but taking a little bit of that emotion out of it, and like kind of like looking at things and being like, like what am I missing here? What was, and really analyzing it is a better perspective to have. But I think getting comfortable with things not going the way that you had originally thought it would.
So, as you are looking to build your team, you just mentioned how you have added someone. How are you thinking about your culture as you are looking to build this ed tech startup?
Is like a very, very important part of what I'm developing, right? And something I'm learning as I am a leader, right, of this startup. And I think what's really important to me just on a personal level is balance. Like I think that it's really important to have that balance, to be open-minded to feedback. We've all been a part of unhealthy cultures before, and it's sad because it's so much of our day is spent at work, and so like when we have been a part of something that just doesn't feel good, doesn't fuel you, right? And I refuse to create something like that. I think that how do you create that, right? Like it's like yeah, that sounds wonderful, but like what does that look like? And I think that healthy communication is like the start of all of that. Learning to reflect and to be honest, and for me to lead in a way that models that for the company as well. Jessica and I just work really, really well together, but that is something as we, and I've definitely collaborated with other people, but to continue to embody, I think that level of, I would say, like regulation, like being able to regulate yourself, right? Like self-regulation. I think that's a huge, huge part in being a good team member and leading too. And so I think that just always keeping that at the forefront it's like very, very important to me.
What habits or routines do you practice to maintain clarity in vision and execution?
Wow. These are good questions. I don't think I would have actually been able to even have this startup had I not had a healthy mindset, if that makes any sense. I have been through a lot in my life, just personally, professionally, and I'm a huge believer in therapy. I believe in like meditation and journaling you know, and I love to do Pilates, like kind of just like that holistic like mindset. And I think that I really would not be here had I not done those beforehand, just because I think not dealing with your own stuff that you have going on will naturally leak its way into every aspect of your life. And it has, and it has in my life. And I think I've been able to manifest just something so successful because of that mindset. And so I just continue to do that. Like even, a couple of weeks ago, I made a mistake and I was upset at myself for it. And I just went back to my roots of like, I journaled about it. I reflected. I have mantras. I'm big on mantras. Even my son will say them. I said to him, I said, is it okay to make mistakes? I think Mama made a mistake. And he goes, it is okay, Mama. And you just take a deep breath and you don't give up, And so it's like so simple, but it's so true. And to like really come back to that and to, yeah, just come back to your roots. Like, why am I doing this? How do I ground myself on a regular basis in order to be able to, like you said, like execute my vision and continue to stay on the right path?
I wrote my book because I wanted to create a guide for educators who wanted to create an education business and in breaking down business speak. So earlier you spoke about MVP and other things, and I wanted to bring it down so those of us who have that experience of being in the classroom or leading teachers or leading schools could understand that within the framework of what we do.
Yeah.
You have that experience consulting, but what you have built and are continuing to build isn't the same thing as the consulting work. It is so different. And it's not like you can just go pick up the phone and go talk to your other consulting friends because they don't have a reference point to
Yeah.
help you with what you're doing. So, who are the people you look to for guidance and what helps them get you to the next level?
So my cousin who was in, she's in Silicon Valley tech, like marketing, has been a huge advisor to me since day one because she has more of that business, expertise that I do not have. And I've learned, like you said, MVP, so many different terminology like through that. But she's definitely been a huge part of helping me to think about things in a different way that I'm not used to. And then through her, I've networked with many different other people too. And like, a potential advisor that I'm talking to right now. Networking has been a huge thing that I don't know. It says, I mean, and not that it's not big in like education, like you do network, but but also like, I've been in the same district. Like I know everybody, it's different, like in business. And I've learned so much. Like it's actually very, very cool to meet so many like just ambitious entrepreneurs and like people who have, done their own thing and just like learning. I love to learn. And so it's been exciting to just like learn a different field, right? Like I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's so cool to hear. Like I just not a life that I'm used to. And I feel like that's been probably a big just exciting part of this journey too, is like just getting to meet all these. I've gone to these different networking events. And so I think I soak it all up, like with anybody I talk to, right? Anything that they have to glean. And I've met and Zoomed and, with a lot of different people that have different expertise in different ways. And I feel like that has also helped me along the way, but just being open to those conversations in general.
If you could go back and give yourself one big piece of advice before launching your startup, what would it be?
I would say that it's okay that I don't have it all figured out. That trusting yourself, listening to feedback and continuing to move forward. That there are days, I mean, it's like a roller coaster at times. Like there's like really cool ups and then, downs. And I think telling myself, especially in those early days, to just trust, what we've developed and trust, the product, trust yourself, trust your instincts, because that has has gotten me here. Right. And so a lot of that self-doubt, I think it's just more of a mental thing. And that it's okay that you don't have it all figured out. Like it's all a learning process, right? Just like I tell my students, just like what our, entire platform is built on, it's goal setting. And so, it's okay to start small. Everyone starts somewhere and you just keep moving forward, keep reflecting and trusting where you're going.
All right. This has been really awesome. I want to end this interview by asking you, what is the best piece of advice that you have been given by another entrepreneur? And what is your advice to another educator who is interested in launching an education business?
The best piece of advice, that's kind of a tough one, but I think that, um, actually Jessica has said to me before, she would say, Jenelle, plenty of people have created like, such things as like you're smart, you're capable, and I think your experience takes you a long way. And I think that piece of advice is definitely encouraging it. And again, like kind of that thing to hold on to, right? As teachers, as people in education, we have so much like knowledge and experience that I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit for. Doing this has helped me realize like, wow, like teaching is harder than this. I would say, and like being an educator, it's a hard profession that we don't give enough credit to. I would say that people who are, starting, educational business or looking to get out of education or like thinking about it, like, man, educators are so creative. There's such a creative aspect to what we do. And if you're looking to venture out, I would say do it because it's just, you have so many tools. Like we juggle so much in education that really does prepare you for so much of what entrepreneurship is. That's what I would say.
That is all right. Thank you, Jenelle, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Will. It was a pleasure.
You are welcome. Now, people, you know how I do this. This podcast episode is going to be on all major podcast platforms, but I'm trying to really grow on Apple Podcasts. So I need you to subscribe. I need you to share with your network. I need you to give me some reviews and some stars because I'm trying to be found and I'm trying to get Oprah on the show. Because I want her to know, yes, that we're doing big things. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Jenelle McClenahen, for coming on and dropping so many gems, and for you for checking out another episode of the Dr. Will Show, the mobile university for entrepreneurs. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.